When it comes to elections, especially when it comes to presidential elections, I've kind of been all over the place. I have been, maybe you could use the term erratic. You certainly shouldn't use the term erotic. I haven't been doing anything untoward in the voting booth or anything like that. Well, maybe I have, because in 2004 I voted for John Kerry because I kind of hoped it would stop the Bush war machine. What a more innocent time. Back when all it was is like Bush is evil and anything other than Bush must be good. Despite the fact that I hated John Kerry. Well, it's kind of unfair to say I hated John Kerry because that would be having an emotion about John Kerry, and that's kind of impossible. In 2008, I supported Obama, but I didn't vote for him. I've always said it was kind of because there was a problem in my registration, but I guess a long enough time has passed, I could tell you the truth. I was kind of just too lazy to do it. I didn't want to admit that because a lot of time people who don't vote are just, it's said like, we're just too lazy. Well, I was. But it was also, in fairness to me, it was pretty obvious he was going to win nationally, and it was also very obvious he was not going to win my very, very, very deeply red state at the time. So I didn't bother. By 2012, I didn't really give a shit about Obama anymore. You guys probably don't. I had Obama derangement syndrome. You guys probably don't really understand what it was like at that time, unless you were of voting age in 2008. Then you probably know that Obama was so exciting, so dynamic, so compelling, so interesting. Seemed like he was going to be such a breath of fresh air, and he turned out to be such a tepid, centrist, nothing, sort of lame duck president. Didn't accomplish much in his tenure other than a gift to the insurance industry, masquerading as some sort of advancement in terms of healthcare. So I didn't really care if he won or if Mitt Romney won. I guess I marginally preferred Obama, but not enough to actually bring my ass into the voting booth. So then by 2016, I still didn't vote because I found the entire prospect of voting completely meaningless by that point. I totally had... If you ever watched the George Carlin stand-up routine about the meaninglessness of voting, I was 100% on board with that at the time. Also, I totally despise Hillary Clinton. So even with all that's happened, and I know this is going to be something that people shake their fist at me for, but I'm still not convinced she would have been a better choice than Trump. We'll never be able to look into that crystal ball and see into the alternate universe where she won, so it's kind of a moot point, but I do think that she was so saber-rattly, and some of the military actions that she was talking about were so provocative that I feel like she might have gotten America entrenched in yet another war. And, as much as I hate Trump and as much as I think that his little pathetic failed insurrection on January 6th was an embarrassment to this country, I would take that over a bunch more American and foreign lives being lost in a meaningless conflict over resources any day. So that's where I stand on that. In 2020, I voted for Biden because same reason I voted for Kerry in 2004. Just wanted to get the bad guy out of office. Trump's the bad guy. Get him out. He was such an embarrassment, such a disgrace. I wanted him gone at any cost, and the cost was vote for dementia-addled Grandpa Joe. So for only the second time in my life, I voted for president. Once again, it was the lesser of two evils. I voted for Biden, just trying to put a damper on Trump and the threat to civil liberties that he represented. So in the last 2 decades, I've only voted in 2 presidential elections. Once for John Kerry, once for Joe Biden. I've abstained 3 times, once out of complete apathy, 2 times out of disgust. This time around, I've decided I'm probably going to vote for a third party. Now, I don't know who yet, but it's the only thing I haven't done yet, so it has a novelty factor to it. Obviously, I've never voted for a Republican either. I figure I can do that when I'm in my 70s and my mind is basically tapioca pudding. I find it so strange that so much online political discourse is centered around voting for the president when, as far as I'm concerned, it's probably one of the most meaningless things a person can do politically. Like, most states in this country are solidly blue, solidly red. So even if you buy into the idea that these parties are different enough to make it worth your while to vote for them, you still have to reckon with the nasty fact that your vote probably isn't really going to count for much unless you happen to live in a swing state. And in 2024, there's really only expected to be 6 swing states. Granted, things could change, but as of now, Nevada, Arizona, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Georgia. I think this argument, and I should specify, I think this is an argument that happens mostly on the left or like among left-leaning liberals and stuff. Republicans don't really have this debate as much, as far as I know. A lot of people on the left have big problems with the vote blue no matter who thing, but very few people on the right have problems with vote red till I'm dead. Then again, you know, to be fair, I do suppose the Libertarian Party is a fairly right-wing party in many senses, and it is the third largest party in America. I mean, a huge drop-off after the first two, but hey. So I guess that I can't say that, you know, there's no one on the right that's dissatisfied with the Republicans, but, you know, I just don't see the debate happening as much on their side. I think that most people who just kind of don't see any point in the elections, they end up just not voting at all. That's what I've kind of done when I found it impossible to care. And in 2024, I'm still finding it very difficult to care. And I know that for a lot of people, that probably doesn't make sense. You know, we got this radical right-wing Supreme Court making decisions that anyone left of Goebbels would probably find regressive. We have a GOP that seems like it's thirsty for LGBT blood. Like, the wolves are at the door, and for many lefties, not voting or voting third party seems like you're opening the door to just let the wolves in, and you're just saying, fuck it, eat me, you know? But I think that there's another way to look at it. I think that, you know, if you look at the status quo and you ask yourself, how did we get here? And how do we get out of here? You might, well, you know, I'm probably getting ahead of myself a little bit, so let's kind of define what the status quo is that we're talking about in terms of these presidential elections and the politics that surrounds them. So, you know, two parties, the Republicans, Democrats, obviously, have the presidency on lockdown. You know, they are the ones in the fight. Others are allowed on the ballot if they jump through the proper hoops, but ultimately the population has been convinced that voting third party is throwing away their vote. This has been, you know, this is a self-fulfilling prophecy because it's not actually true. I mean, you know, it's never happened. A third party's never won, I guess. But, you know, if a majority of people in key states like voted for the Green or voted for Libertarian, there's no actual mechanism that like prevents them from taking office. There's no actual thing that would stop that from happening. Like, their candidate would become president. There's nothing actually stopping a third party from winning other than the widespread belief that they just can't. So it's the very definition of a self-fulfilling prophecy. The two main parties, once again, Republicans, Democrats, I don't know why I need to specify, everybody knows. You know, they're barely different on a number of issues, like foreign policy, Wall Street regulation, immigration, even issues that they seem like there might be some difference, like policing and guns. The difference between them is kind of marginal at best. Their rhetoric may be different, but when it comes down to the brass tacks of policy, they kind of behave in virtually the same manner. Like, the true difference between the parties, and therefore the areas that they both would like us to be most focused on as voters, are, you know, like social issues. Like, Republicans, they present this vision of America like they want this traditionalist structure that harkens back to the 1950s ideal with the nuclear family, predominantly Christian, predominantly white, predominantly English speaking. And the Democrats, they want it more like a rainbow coalition. We all love each other despite our differences. All races live in harmony. LGBTQ people are every bit as valid as heterosexual people. We all hold hands. We all sing Kumbaya. We are the world. It's a beautiful day. You know, but at the end of the day, neither party's policies actually reflect any genuine desire to realize these visions that they've laid out to their respective electorates, right? Because that's like strictly campaign pablum. I mean, like, if Republicans really wanted to bring back the 1950s, they'd want to bring back the economics of the 1950s. Because, like, the biggest impediment to a single breadwinner household these days is not feminism. It's not some decline of moral values. It's the economic reality that most people can barely afford to, you know, support themselves with a blue-collar job, let alone an entire family. If the Democrats really wanted to bring us into this progressive utopia, they wouldn't be passing giant defense spending bills. They wouldn't be signing off on big cash infusions to Wall Street. There wouldn't still be like kids in cages at the border. And there would be landmark anti-discrimination acts pushing back against the slow erosion of rights represented by this new radical Supreme Court. Democrats really don't fight those battles at all. Or when they do, they throw in the towel in the first round, right? Like, you know, we put it to a vote, we lost. Oh, well, you know, the votes aren't there. Well, find them, dude. Like, one and done, that's it? We tried? It's pretty obvious to me that the objective of both these parties is to preserve the status quo. And why wouldn't they want to preserve it? Because it's a status quo where they're in power. So, you know, if you were them, you'd probably be trying to preserve it too. It's great for you, not so great for everybody else. And since, you know, both these parties basically represent moneyed interests, corporate power, military power, they really can't center debate issues pertaining to any of those things. They're not ever going to talk about, like, the massive problems of income inequality in this country other than in the most superficial possible means, because they can't center that, because if they center that, then they're going to be expected to draw a sharp contrast between themselves on those issues. And they just can't, because no sharp contrast actually exists. So it's just, we're going to virtue signal, you're going to virtue signal, and then we're not going to do anything different. So trans rights, obviously big issue right now, tremendously important. Black rights, tremendously important. Civil liberties in general, tremendously important to all of us. Important to humanity, important to the future of a free society. But you know what, like who they're not really all that important to is like the top 1%, the military and corporate elites, the people in positions of wealth and power and near infinite privilege. They don't have to worry about any of those things because they already sort of exist in their own separate society with its own separate set of rules. They're kind of quarantined away from the average people. They get to live in a bubble that's very different than the rest of this country, where the rules are different and they're sort of blissfully unconcerned with our petty struggles. And they own both parties. Because, like, think about it. If you or I want to talk with the president, we could try with all our might to get an audience with him. And it would almost certainly never happen. But if any billionaire in this country wants to meet with the president, they can. Like, oh, how's your Tuesday? Money opens the doors of access. Money gets you into the senator's ear. Money gets big government subsidies passed that wind up in your pocket so that you can get even richer, so that you can buy even more politicians. And guess what? Democrats and Republicans are both on sale. And that's the status quo that prevents any real problems from being solved in this country. And I think most people, at the end of the day, agree with that. Because I've talked to people left, right, and center, and, this is one of the most popular things you can say in any crowd of people. They all agree. So with that being said, I ask you again, how did we get here, and how do we get out of here? The second question, I think, is the more important, to be honest with you. But, I know we don't get out of here by voting blue no matter who, voting red till we're dead, because that's how we got here. That's exactly what they, the elites, want. They want you to continue to greenlight the political power of their twin parties because they're afraid of losing. You're afraid of losing what little you have. They're afraid of losing your captive rote support. And so they orchestrated this system. They know how it works. They count on it working that way. So am I taking a hardline stance, by the way, of never vote for the lesser of two evils? No, I'm not. If that's the vote you feel like you need to cast, I get it. I've done it. I may do it again. But what I am telling you is the only reason that the lesser evil is less evil in the first place is just to make it seem like you have a choice. At the end of the day, the evils are pretty much equal. The differences between them only exist to make you sweat and to keep you voting for the political duopoly. So, like, let's say your tireless commitment to this principle of vote blue no matter who wins the day forever. Let's say it's a rip-roaring success and there's never another Republican president again. As far-fetched as that is, it's all Democrats from here on out. Does that solve the country's problems? Does it even have a prayer of doing so? And if not, what's really the point of it? But let's put fairy tales aside because there's no way it's just going to be Democrats from here on out. The reality is that no matter how you cling to your orthodoxy of it's always better to vote for the lesser of two evils, the Republicans will have the White House again someday, and it won't be long. It'll be soon. It's going to be 2024 or 2028 or 2032. Traditionally, this country has bounced back and forth. So it's likely we're going to continue to do so. So really the most you can realistically hope for with this strategy is to stave off the right for an election cycle or two, but their day will come, as it always does. And if you really want to beat them, not just for 4 years or 8 years, if you really want to beat them once and for all, you're going to need a party of fighters, a party willing to take on the root causes of America's corrosion, a party willing to fight for true leftist economic populism, as well as a robust social liberalism. And that party is not, at this point in its current incarnation, the Democratic Party. So, like, I don't know, the way I see it, we either replace the Democrats with a progressive party or we reform the Democrats into a progressive party. And to my way of thinking, the only way you can really reform them into a progressive party is by starving establishment candidates of power, which means starving them of votes. If the Democrat running isn't at least as left as Bernie Sanders, who is a centrist in my book, and I'm sure many of your books as well, then don't vote for them. Because the only way Democrats will realize they need to change is if all of their establishment candidates keep on losing. If progressive candidates win for the Democrats and establishment candidates lose for the Democrats, they're going to stop putting up establishment candidates. Because even though they love all that corporate money, it doesn't do them much good at the end of the day if they don't have any power. Because what those moneyed interests are buying from Democrats is influence and power. So if we stop playing the game and stop giving power to these Democrats who then sell it to the moneyed interest in the first place, then, hey, they don't have anything to bargain with anymore. So they would rather join us in a progressive cause, but it's going to take starving them. It's going to take removing power from them. It's going to take saying, hey, if you put up a Joe Biden, if you put up a John Kerry, we're not going to just say, oh, well, lesser of two evils and vote for them. Because every time we do that, we're just saying, like, this is fine. You can continue to do this. You can continue to be this way. And it's not fine. They can't continue to do this. They can't continue to be this way because the cost of them being that way is that we have no representation on a whole slew of important issues. And the cost of us having no representation on a whole slew of important issues is the existential, an existential threat to the vox populi. Everyone in this country, except for the rich, they're the only ones who make out okay if we continue on the course that we're on now. So if you want to change course, I don't see any other way. And I understand that there's problems with the strategy. Of course there are. Because if you apply that kind of pressure to the Democrats, you're basically throwing cycles to the Republicans. And obviously, especially if you are LGBT or black or any other sort of minority, you're rightly reluctant to do that. But I ask you, how else do we solve this then? If someone else has a viable strategy to solve this problem, where we get rid of the duopoly without ceding ground to the right, at least for a time, look, I'm all ears on that. I'd love to hear the plan. But as of now, I don't think there is a plan because I've tried to figure it out. I'm not saying that I'm the smartest fucking guy on the face of the earth. I'm not saying that if I can't figure it out, no one can. If someone can, I'm willing to follow that person to the end of the earth. But I've thought about it, and I don't see a way. I don't see any other way. Either the blue dragon needs to be punished until it obeys us, or it needs to be slaughtered so that a more powerful dragon can take its place and present a new and more substantive threat to the red dragon. Sorry for the dragon analogy. It's kind of an old meme. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. I really appreciate you listening to this ramble. I appreciate hearing from you guys on this subject. I'm the Amazing Atheist. Peace.